Can avoidance change? What needs to happen first? Let's begin with a question that quietly torments many partners in relationships with avoidant individuals. Can they actually change? Is there hope that one day the person who withdraws at the first sign of intimacy, who builds walls instead of bridges, might finally let someone in? It's easy to lose yourself in wishful thinking, especially when you've glimpsed the soft, loving core beneath an avoidance emotional armor. But here's the honest truth. Avoidance can change, but only if certain things happen first. Without them, you're not in a relationship. You're in a one-person emotional performance. To understand what needs to happen first, we must begin with the core of avoidant behavior. Avoidant attachment doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's born in early environments where closeness felt unsafe, where vulnerability wasn't rewarded, but punished or ignored. The child learns, don't rely on others, don't show need, don't trust connection. These internalized rules become silent scripts, guiding them well into adulthood. And here's the critical piece. The avoidant doesn't see themselves as the problem. They've spent a lifetime believing that emotional distance is not only safe, it's necessary. So change isn't just about behavior. It's about confronting a worldview built for survival. Now let's talk about the first thing that absolutely must happen before any transformation can begin. Awareness. Avoidants must become aware that their style of connection isn't just normal or just how I am. They have to see that it's a strategy, a protective one, yes, but also one that limits love, intimacy, and growth. And this moment of realization, it rarely happens in comfort. Often, it arrives through emotional consequences, a breakup they didn't want, loneliness that cuts deeper than usual, or the sudden realization that the partner they pushed away isn't coming back. Until an avoidant feels the impact of their own walls, there's no incentive to tear them down. But awareness isn't enough. The second critical step is ownership. Many avoidants are masters at intellectualizing their behavior. They'll say things like, I just don't like needy people, or I'm just not good at emotions. But none of that leads to transformation. Ownership means they stop blaming others for how disconnected they feel. They stop expecting their partners to overcompensate for their lack of emotional availability. This is where we see the difference between avoidants, who can change, and those who won't. The ones who can change say, I push people away, and I want to understand why. That one sentence opens the door to everything else. The third requirement is something many people underestimate: the capacity for emotional regulation. You see, avoidants aren't just running from other people. They're running from their own emotions. Vulnerability feels dangerous. Connection feels like exposure. So what do? They shut down. They detach. They distract. For real change to occur, avoidants must learn to stay present with their own feelings, even the uncomfortable ones. They need to sit with sadness, fear, longing, without fleeing. And this isn't easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest emotional skills to develop. But without it, they'll always retreat into silence when things get too real. Let's take a moment to look at the relationship from the partner's point of view. If you're in love with an avoidant, you might find yourself caught in an exhausting loop, giving more than you receive, over-explaining, trying to prove that you're safe, loyal, loving. You become the emotional glue. But here's a wake-up call. You can't do the work for them. You can be understanding, patient, even loving, but you can't change their wiring. The avoidant has to want to do that themselves. You can't love someone into emotional maturity. They have to grow into it. So what else needs to happen? The avoidant must be willing to step into emotional discomfort. This is where most people turn back. Because change, real, inner change doesn't feel good. It's not inspiring quotes and deep conversations. It's awkward moments. It's saying, "I miss you," when your instinct is to act indifferent. It's choosing to stay present during conflict instead of storming off or shutting down. In short, it's the daily decision to replace emotional avoidance with emotional courage. That courage has to be practiced like a muscle, and in the beginning, it will feel weak. But with repetition, it grows. Another crucial piece is therapy or conscious self-work. Avoidant attachment patterns are not casual habits. They're deeply embedded neural pathways. Reading a few books or watching a few videos can spark insight, but to rewire the emotional responses that have defined your entire relational history, that requires consistent work. This is where therapy, especially emotionally focused therapy or trauma-informed work, can be life-changing. It helps avoidants understand the original wound and, more importantly, how it's being reenacted in their adult relationships. And let's not forget, timing matters. Some avoidants aren't ready to change, not because they're bad people, but because their emotional survival still depends on distance. They haven't hit the moment where their own defenses start to feel like a cage instead of a sanctuary. If you're with someone in this stage, waiting for them to wake up can drain your soul. You'll keep trying to crack open a door that only they can unlock from the inside. You must ask yourself, how long are you willing to wait for potential? So here's the truth many don't want to hear. Avoidance can change, but most won't unless they have to. There has to be a reason strong enough to override the fear of connection. Sometimes it's the pain of losing someone irreplaceable. Sometimes it's the quiet misery of chronic disconnection. And sometimes it's hitting emotional rock bottom. But change doesn't come from being loved more. It comes from choosing to face what's been avoided for a lifetime. If you are someone with avoidant tendencies listening to this, know this. You are not broken. Your walls were once protection. But if you're here, listening, it means part of you is ready for something more, something deeper. And that part of you deserves to be heard. The journey won't be easy, but on the other side of vulnerability isn't weakness. It's connection. Real, rich, terrifying, beautiful connection. And if you're someone who loves an avoidant, here's your power. Set boundaries, protect your peace, and never abandon your own needs to keep the relationship afloat. If the avoidant is capable of change, they will begin to meet you halfway. Not because you demanded it, but because they want to. Because they've realized that love isn't about distance, control, or safety. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. So, can avoidance change? Yes. But what needs to happen first? Awareness, ownership, emotional regulation, discomfort, support, and above all, choice. Until they choose to change, your love will not be enough. But once they do, everything can begin to shift.